Hi everybody, Captain Al speaking with your time training tips and 10 ticks targeted to teaching technical type transport travel through tailored tiny takeaways. The question for today, episode 8, part 3, what FMS-CDU exercises do airline pilots need to know? Today we discuss airway intercepts and intersections for the Boeing 747-400 and 747-8. We're in the virtual simulator to answer the question for today, what FMS-CDU exercises do airline pilots need to know? This is part 3 on airway intercepts. We're looking at a Navigraph high altitude chart. We're in Seattle, Tacoma, departing runway 34 right via the Mountain 1 departure. We'll be climbing to 12,000 feet, crossing Niesig to the north at or above 4,000 feet. And then from there we turn right to a 070 heading for vectors. The vectors are going to be to the Beezer intersection, which is represented by this dashed magenta line going to Beezer intersection, which is right here. Then via Victor 2 to Ellensburg, Victor 336, which is this segment, to Ephrata, and then direct to Moses Lake. One of the first things we'll demonstrate is how to get rid of the radar vector intercept line in order to go direct to Beezer, and there's actually two methods you can use for that. One is pretty well known, and the other one is not as well known. So we'll cover that. Then we'll pick up a heading of probably east, and the clearance will be expect radar vectors to intercept J70 to Ephrata, which is this airway right here, and then direct to Moses Lake. So we'll show the airway intercept to that. Once we're intercepted, we'll turn to the south, head back towards Seattle. We'll be given a clearance to intercept J34 to Olympia, and then from Olympia we'll pick up J126 to intercept J70 to Seattle. And so then we'll demonstrate the airway intercept. And you can see in this case the airways intercept right here, but there is no named waypoint, so the FMC will create a name for that waypoint. It automatically does that. Contrast that with something like this where there is a named waypoint. In this case J34, the crossing of J34 in J20 does have a name. It's called Ratty. So in this case the computer would pull up that name if you tried to put in these two airways. But in the case like right here, the crossing of this airway and this airway, there is no name. So we'll get rid of the Navigraph chart. We'll go over to the PSX 747-400, and we have the legacy FMC. And you can see that on our legs page, we'll be going via a 344 track until passing 840 to Niesig. Then from Niesig, we make that right turn to 070 heading for vectors. Once we're cleared direct Beezer, we can modify to go direct Beezer. That's where we will show those two methods of getting rid of this vector line, and then on course to Moses Lake. If we look at the takeoff reference page, we have NADP2 programmed in there right now, which is to accelerate at 3,000, thrust reduction at 1,500, and engine out at 1,000. But we're going to change that, I think, to NADP2, which would be the 1,000 feet acceleration, and thrust reduction will be flap 5. And that way maybe we'll get the unable next altitude message, and we'll try changing the thrust from climb to thrust, which is what it's going to go to at flap 5, to climb thrust in order to make that restriction. So we'll kind of take a look at that. And with that, let's take off. We'll release the parking brake, and we'll set 70% N1. Let it stabilize. Push toga, set takeoff thrust.
Path set. Positive climb. Gear up.
Okay, we'll go ahead and engage the left autopilot. And you'll notice LNAV engaged at 50 feet, VNAV, thrust ref VNAV speed at 400 feet. At 1,000 feet above the field, we'll start to get acceleration. And so we'll see the bug go up.
Traffic. Climb.
You got a TCAS warning, huh? Okay, so we'll disconnect the autopilot, we'll disconnect the auto throttle. And you can see we're way above the
Clear up conflict.
we're way above the command anyway, so that was good.
Flaps 5.
Little surprise for the video, little Aerowinx TCAS problem that's thrown in there occasionally. We'll go ahead and engage the autopilot again, and we'll re-engage the auto throttle. All we have to do that is cycle the arm switch off and then back to arm, and that'll re-engage the auto throttle. We'll go flaps 1.
Flaps 1.
And you'll see even with this climb 2, we're still going to make NISA get 4,000. If there was any doubt, we could always go to the thrust page and change climb 2 to climb 1 or climb in order to make that. But you see we're going to make that no problem. We'll go flaps up.
Flaps up.
Let's go to our legs page now. Bring the range up a little bit. So we just passed NISA, got her above 4, we're climbing at 12. We're now going on a 070 heading for vectors. And then ATC is going to clear us on course. We do our after takeoff checklist, of course, which is the gear is up and off, and the flaps are up, and the after takeoff checklist is complete. And notice there's 2 lines that follow us along here. This one line is a vector line, and the other line is the line going to Beezer. And so right now we're actually in LNAV flying a heading of 070 degrees for vectors, and so that's where it's going to stop. You'll see this heading bug settle on 070. And then when we're clear direct Beezer, we can go direct Beezer. Now there's 2 ways to do that. One way would be to have your pilot monitoring, which is us in the case of a flight simmer, bring Beezer to the scratch pad and bring Beezer to the top to replace the vectors, and then that would get rid of the vector line, and you can see the dashed white line going direct to Beezer, and we could execute that. So that's probably the most common way of doing it, is to let the pilot monitoring know, yeah, give me direct Beezer. But the other way we can do it does not involve the CDU, it just involves the MCP, which would be the pilot flying since the autopilot is engaged. So if ATC said right now, you're cleared present position direct Beezer, all we would have to do are 2 actions on the mode control panel. One would be to just push heading select. We'd want to make sure our heading bug is out in front of us, so you can see that we can update our heading to course. And that way the airplane doesn't start turning one way or another. When we push heading select, the vector line is going to drop out. You'll see this drop out, and we'll be left with Beezer, and then all we have to do is activate or reactivate LNAV. And so let's say we're clear direct Beezer at this time, and I don't want to involve the pilot monitoring because maybe he's busy doing something, or I just want to do it myself. I'd let him know what I'm doing. So we're clear direct Beezer, I'd push heading select, and now watch, when you push heading select, the vector drops out. We have a line to Beezer, and now all we have to do is push LNAV, and the airplane will capture and go direct to Beezer. So those two methods, again, the first one is what most people know. The second one is a little less known, but that's another way to get rid of the vector line to go direct to Beezer. Let's go back to that 070 heading. And let's continue our climb to 17,000, which is our cruise altitude. Now let's say the clearance is fly your heading 070, expect radar vectors to intercept J70 to Ephrata, Echo Papa Hotel, and then direct Moses Lake. So once I hear Airway, I don't think legs page, because legs page are waypoints. When I hear Airway, I think route page, and that's exactly where we have to do this. We have to go to the route page, because that's the only place you can put in airways. So the clearance is to expect radar vectors to intercept J70 to Ephrata. So the first thing we want to do is type out J70. And we can just line select that right to the top under the first via at L1. And what that'll do is put that in, but then it gives you boxes because it has no idea where along J70 you want to end up. Well, the clearance was J70 to Ephrata. So we'll put in Ephrata. Now we could type it in, but it's here. So rather than type it in, I always look here first to see if there's anywhere where I can bring it to the scratch pad instead of typing it out. So in this case, we'll go to Ephrata. We'll bring Ephrata into the boxes. And when you do that, the airplane is going to think about it. And let me pause the sim for 1 second. I'll pause the sim right here. What the computer is going to do is, it might even say standby 1, because these computers are slow, especially the legacy. And it'll think about it. And it may take a second or two for it to think about it, and then it comes up with a solution. And the solution is going to be, if you remember J70, it kind of followed along here somewhere in this fashion, going to the east. So what it looks at is your present position, which is right here. In fact, let me go to a different, well, let me unfreeze the simulator for a second. So we can see this a little better. Usually I like to go to this layout where I can see it. Yeah, that's much better, because now you can see the ND a little bit better. So let me freeze the sim again, and we'll go back to our route page. Well, we got to freeze the sim. Let's go back to our route page. There we are. Let's freeze it again. Okay, so we've got J70, but it's asking J70 to where? We're going to tell it Ephrata. Now, what it does, this is the way the computer works. It looks at where you are, the tip of the triangle, which is right there, and it kind of draws a beam position to that airway, which, if you imagine it, is like right here somewhere. And so it's going to put a line kind of in a beam position to that, where that route, where we intersect that route at a 90-degree angle. And then it looks at the preceding waypoint, whatever that is back here, that forms that route, and it'll pick that point. And that'll be the starting point of the airway. Then we'll have the airway, and then we'll have the ending point, which will be Ephrata. So let's unfreeze the simulator and we'll look at that. So again, here's Ephrata. We'll bring Ephrata to the scratch pad. And we want to go J70 to Ephrata, so we'll put it in the boxes. And we see what happens here is it creates the starting point of the airway, which is normie, puts in J70 to Ephrata. And you'll notice now we can look at it and say, okay, well, there's the tip of the triangle right there. There's where it crosses a beam that route, and it picks the waypoint before that that defines the airway, which is normie. See, there might be a waypoint back here, way behind us, but it's picking this one because it's the preceding waypoint from the beam position. That's how it knows. Go ahead and execute that. Now when you execute that, you'll notice that normie is the active waypoint. And if we go to the legs page, you'll see that Normie has dashes above it. Dashes mean that it will auto-sequence automatically. Normally you have to be within a certain range for it to do that. So if we look at our progress page and we go to next page, we can see the cross-track error is 11.6. Well, that's within 21 nautical miles, and that's usually the range where it, for more than 21 nautical miles, this might not auto-sequence. But if you're within 21 nautical miles, it will auto-sequence. So what we'll do is we'll take our heading and go ahead and turn it toward that airway. And so all I would have to do then is go to LNAV. LNAV will arm in white, and then this will auto-sequence as we approach the airway. Normie will go white and Bluet will go magenta. See, because right now it looks like it might capture and go to Normie, and we don't want that. Or it might fly through the airway if we happen to be too far out. So we normally would teach to just don't even trust the auto-sequencing. This is what we teach, is to normally just intercept leg to Bluet. And the way you would do that would be bring Bluet to the scratch pad, Bluet to the top, and then this intercept course is the course that was remembered from Normie to Bluet, which is 076, but it's not active, it's small. We need to make it active by selecting the carroted prompt, and then that would make it big, and that would draw the dashed white line through Normie, and when I execute that, you would then get Bluet being the active waypoint. But I'm going to erase that because I want to show the auto-sequencing. So you'll notice that again, this is dashes. That's telling me it will auto-sequence. But normally you have to, normally you have to be within a certain mileage for it to do that. So that's why we don't normally trust that. Only because I've seen people on check rides fly through this and not because it won't auto-sequence. And other times it will auto-sequence. So we normally just say to just create a line of Bluet and get rid of Normie, and then that's the solution. But I'm going to show you how this works, and so you'll see that as we approach the airway, and if we go to the progress page 2, we'll see that that will capture here shortly. But what I'm looking for as I approach this airway is I want to see this go white. I want to see Normie go white and Bluet go magenta. And that's really what I'm looking for. And it just did it. You can see Bluet went magenta, Normie went white, LNAV captured, and the airplane's turning to go to Bluet. So that's called auto-sequencing. It auto-sequenced automatically. Now again, we just normally do not trust it unless you're going to go check your distance from, how much cross-track you are and what your distance is. But to be safe, we normally just say extend the line into Bluet and you're done with it. But if you recognize that you are fairly close to the airway, then there's nothing wrong with auto-sequencing. That's the way it operates. But like I said, I have seen people fly through this thinking it's going to auto-sequence and it doesn't. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take up a heading of south, and we're going to intercept that J30, I think it was J34, to intercept, let's see, I think it was J126, and then, let me look at the chart here, and then J70. Okay, so we're going to pick up a heading of, let's go 180. And the clearance now is expect return to Seattle. And you're going to pick up radar vectors heading 180 to intercept J34 to Olympia, J126 to intercept J70 to Seattle. That's the clearance. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our route page, and we're going to change our destination to Seattle because we're going back to Seattle. So we'll go to route page 2, go back to page 1, put in KSEA because that's where we're going back. That re-references everything like the pressurization for our destination station. That re-references the logic for our departure arrival. So you want to put that, all that stuff, you want to get that destination back in there to Seattle. Then what we can do is go to the route page. And the route was J34, so we're going to put that in. Again, I think Airway, I think route page, I don't think legs page. J34, and we'll put that to the top. And again, it takes it. It gives us boxes. J34 to where, the computer's asking us. I want to go J34 to Olympia. So I put in Olympia, which is Oscar, Lima, Mike. And then when I put that in, the computer will think about it again. And again, it's going to do that same beam calculation and pick the waypoint that's before the beam position. So watch when I put that in. It creates, and I'm going to freeze the simulator here just to show you that, just so we don't get too far along. If you draw a line to perpendicular to this airway, and then you go to the waypoint preceding this, you see it's right there, Mike Whiskey Hotel. And then it's going to go to Ratty, and then it goes to Olympia or wherever it's going to go, based on whatever that airway is. So when we execute that, you'll notice that, oops, I can't execute it yet, because you can do it in the PMDG, but with the Aerowinx you have to release the sim to execute it. You execute that, and then I'm going to freeze the sim again. So now you can see that we have Moses Lake as the active waypoint. Ratty is white, but again, if we go to the legs page, and I'd have to you'll see that Moses Lake has dashes, so again, this will auto-sequence automatically. But again, what we normally would teach to do is say, well, go to Ratty instead of Moses Lake. Moses Lake is the active waypoint, so I certainly don't want it to capture and go to Moses Lake, or to fly through the airway, and that's normally what it would do if you're outside of that 21 nautical mile range. You can see in this case I'm not. But let's use the second method where we just intercept leg to Ratty. So let's go unfreeze the simulator. And this is the second way, this is the other way we could do it, which would be to bring Ratty to the scratch pad, Ratty to the top. And then this course 251 is the course between Moses Lake and Ratty. So let's go ahead and make that big. That draws the dashed line, and we can execute that. And now you can see the active waypoint is Ratty, and Moses Lake goes away. And then we can arm LNAV. And LNAV in this case will capture it because it's very close to the magenta line at this point. So that's the first part of this little exercise of the Airway intercept. We'll go back to the route page. So we're going now direct Ratty, J34 to Olympia, but the rest of the clearance was to pick up J126, and so we'll put that in, J126. And then we said we're going to go from J126 to cross to J70 to Seattle. So we can bring J70 to the scratch pad, bring it under J126, and that will create a crossing point at, and it says XJ70. It's kind of naming it for this airway. So that's the crossing point of J126 and J70, and it gives it a name because it was unnamed, like you saw in the beginning of the video that we described. And then where do we want to go after that? We want to go direct to Seattle. So what we're going to do is put in, you see I looked for it to see if it's there, and I know it's not there. So I put in Sierra Echo Alpha J70 to Seattle. And then we probably are going to have to clean the rest of this up because it's still in there. So if we execute that, that will now go to, if I bring my range up, we can maybe see it. You can see how that's going here. It goes from to Ratty to Olympia, J126 to intercept J70, which is that XJ70, and then to Seattle. So that's the routing into Seattle. But you can see we've got a bunch of stuff here that we don't want. And so we can go back to the legs page. Notice there's a discontinuity after Seattle. And we don't want this stuff, so what we can do is take the last route waypoint, which is Moses Lake. Go back to the previous page, put Moses Lake into the boxes. That'll bypass all those waypoints, and then all we have to do is delete that one waypoint, Moses Lake, and that gets rid of everything. Now, of course, you could have gone delete, 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 delete. You could delete 8 waypoints or whatever, or these 3 waypoints, but the easier way is just to take the last route waypoint, go back to the previous page, put it in the boxes, bypass all those waypoints, and then you only have one waypoint to delete, and that's Moses Lake, and then execute that. And now you'll see all that stuff, that unwanted stuff is gone. Okay, so then we'll head back to Seattle, and that'll complete our discussion of Airway Intercept. And my timed training tip of 10 minutes is probably going to be more like 25 minutes. Well, so much for time training tips. We try to keep them at 10 minutes. Remember I said, don't keep me to that 10-minute limit. Thanks for watching.